virtual delivery. And as that happened, it became clear of a structural inequity in this country, which is playing itself out in and around digital delivery. And so districts looked at it, began to deal with it, but what soon happened is they pivoted from that issue with the realization that school would not be opened up until September here in New York. They pivoted to reentry and beyond. And when they pivoted the reentry and beyond, a lot more than virtual delivery became a critical issue. And so we began to gather best practices around the country. We're literally this week and next week running at our annual Model Schools Conference, where we have several thousand people online. And I'll be doing a keynote to that at noon today. And that conference is about these best practices. But then suddenly, 3 weeks ago, the horrific killing of George Floyd. And it caused every single school administrator in this country to pause. And we began to say, you know what? As difficult as COVID-19 was, it just became a far more complicated issue for us to look at, because it brought a spotlight to a second structural inequity in this country. And that one was around race. When we look at all these issues, one thing is very clear, and that is culture trumps strategy. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious cultural issue here, and we can't take it lightly. This issue of the structural inequities, most of us have been sensitive to it in education. Some of us have been advocates, but we need to recognize that the minority community has lived this for centuries. And it's reached a tipping point in this country where that, together with the structural inequities of poverty that is somewhat related to race, but not exclusive to race, are things that we need to pay attention to relative to when we talk about technology, when we talk about professional development. Because most of our professional development for the last decade or two has come out of our intense effort to improve student performance as measured by state test. And I am not opposed to state testing. Some of you on the program today who've been around for as long as I have may recognize that I used to be a deputy commissioner. I headed up curriculum and testing for the department. I'm not opposed to testing, but testing doesn't address the primary issues we're now facing today. And what caused that incredible focus on testing was an earlier national event. Way back in the 1980s, it was called The Nation at Risk. And there was a national report that came out, and it really was led by business and industry, with pressure onto the political community to say that American children were not being as well prepared as some kids in other nations. And at that point, the two nations everybody was worried about was Germany and Japan. I served for New York State as the point person on the Nation at Risk report. And that led in turn for me to start the International Center. And our push was making academic standards more rigorous and more relevant. Then No Child Left Behind fueled that even more, to the point where we became fixated in American education on getting kids ready for the next grade, the next test, the next level of education, all of which were very, very important. But I want to suggest to you, in some ways, we took our eye off the kids in the process. We got so fixated on the standards and the test. And if you don't think that's true, ask anybody who's ever been a kindergarten teacher. for at least 10 years. Ask them what happened in the classrooms. See, in the past, kindergarten was designed as part of the socialization process. And there was structured play and rules. What happened is we drove academics earlier and earlier and earlier, but we never expanded the school day or school time. And so what happened, something had to give, and unintentionally, what gave are some of the very issues now we're facing around SEL. And so that's a long introduction to what I'd like to share with you, because I'd like to go and talk about three different phases, if you will. Bernadette, can you everybody hear okay and everything? Okay, good. Phase one is I'm going to spend some time talking about what did we know in June 2019, a year ago. What did we know that when March 2020 hit, we realized we should have addressed but didn't? I want to suggest to you that in many ways we still haven't addressed those very issues we knew a year ago. Then I want to go to what did we learn during this interruption? The interruption from March into the return of school this year. What have we learned on top of what we already knew? But most importantly then, I want to talk about what can we anticipate? What can we anticipate for a 2020-21 school year and beyond? But let's begin with what did we know? We knew we had a social injustice issue that has just hit us squarely between the eyes. We knew these structural inequities of poverty, of race, and so on existed. Number two, we knew there were advancing technologies. We knew technologies was advancing at an accelerated rate. And I want to just touch on a few of those. And by the way, at the end, I'm going to give you a URL you can go to. And the URL will have 8 different areas you can check if you want additional information. And one of them you may want to check will be relating to the advancing technologies, because I have a series of videos that really we can't play in a Zoom because they just won't work well for you. But they are about these advancing technologies. But let me first describe what we knew in the classroom. When the interruption happened and the kids had to go digital, what we know is some school districts were pretty well prepared for that. They had the devices in the kids' hands. They had trained their teachers. They had made provisions to make sure everybody could directly or indirectly get bandwidth. On the other hand, if you look at this yellow bar, on the left-hand side, we had some schools that hardly done anything. Some teachers are not prepared, some schools were not prepared, some families were not prepared. And so what we saw is great variation. The other thing we then saw is how it related to the workplace. Now, I'm sure that everybody on the phone today, on the Zoom meeting, has either an iPhone or a device like this. I want you to think for a moment how many things this has replaced in your life in the last 10 years. Just think for a moment. Your calendar, your flashlight, maps, camera, photo album. This list is incredibly long. And do kids also have these devices? By the way, Bernadette, I keep getting to admit people.
Oh, I apologize. I'm admitting them right now.
You are, okay. Yep. The kids have these devices. They're an extension of their bodies. Question, do you let the kids use these when they take a state test? If I could give you only one word as to why we don't let them use them, you only get one word. I want you to think about what the word is. And how many of you would say cheat? They would cheat. They would either go online, find the answer, or they would share information with others. In other words, they might either use resources or work with others. In the world beyond school, what are the two most basic skills you need to become independent as an adult? Is it use resources, work with others? I wonder how many of you have a son or a daughter or a grandchild who's a preteen, a teen, or in their early 20s? And if you do, how many of you hope that as an adult they become independent? If you don't want that, you're a sick, sick person. That's all I can tell you. What are the two most basic skills they need? Use resources, work with others. What do we call it in school? Cheating. I want to raise a tough question to all of you. Are we trying to force 21st century technology to fit our 20th century schools? Or are you, as leaders of Suffolk and some Nassau County, are you trying to help transform your 20th century schools into the reality of a technological information-based society? Interesting problem. We just recently, 2 weeks ago, lost my dad at the age of 101. And he used to tell his great-grandchildren and his great-great-grandchildren, and he had a ton of them, that when he was little in upstate New York, he used to ride a horse to school. Because in upstate New York, they didn't have cars yet. He would talk about, and by the way, the grandkids thought it was pretty cool to ride a horse to school. All the kids rode a horse to school when he was little. They didn't have radio yet in northern New York State. Television was 3 to 4 decades away from being created. Social media wasn't on anybody's radar screen. They didn't have running water in their houses. The school calendar and the school year is the same today as it was when he went. Our individual disciplines we have in place are the same disciplines. Why do we have all that? Because our schools are what we call forward focused. What does that mean? When we put together a budget for next year, we think about what did we have in place in this year and how much more money do we need to do next year what we did this year. We need a little bit more to add some additional services. If I'm a classroom teacher, I look at what lessons worked really well, I keep them. What ones didn't work, I tweak and try to improve. We're constantly building from the past. In the nation's most rapidly improving schools, they are no longer doing that. They're putting a stake in the ground 3, 4, 5 years out and saying, let's try to agree, community, board, teachers, parents, let's try to agree. What is it we want our kids to be able to know, do, and be like in 5 years to be independent in the world they're going to live in? And they're building back from the future. Now, I love New York. I have a lot of respect for the state of New York. But ladies and gentlemen, you'll be hard-pressed to find any place in this country that has had less change in their schools than the state of New York. We haven't changed. We just keep playing with the margins. Because the second you go to change anything, it impacts an adult. It's not the kids resisting the change. It's the adults. Let me take you further. Hang on. Siri Alexa, assume you've all used it. Advancing technology. Let me tell you where it's going to be in 12 to 24 months. As you all know, just like the iPhone has more and more capacity, technologies like this are going to have more and more capacity. Right now, you ask basic questions. Prototypes are done. Both have patents to do this, which is, I have a paper to write. The paper needs to be 600 to 800 words. It needs to be written at this Lexile level, and it needs to have this many sources quoted. And Siri or Alexa will write the paper for you. It's 12 to 24 months away. In the world beyond school, in the workplace, will they want you to use that technology, or will they want you to take the time to actually write the paper? Anybody got any doubts? There's a new earbud that's out right now, size of an earbud, translates language instantaneously into 34 languages. What's that going to do to second language programs? And some people say, well, wait a minute. Man, maybe, does that mean we don't need second language? And I suggest you, no, I don't think it means that at all. But it may mean that those programs need to change. Maybe it's not so much about language translation. Maybe it's cultural understanding. By the way, isn't that kind of the root of some of our issues we're facing right now? Oh, wait, but if it's cultural understanding, isn't that the role of social studies? That's their turf. Why do we have the same disciplines in place we had when my dad was a kid? Why do we have them functioning as silos rather than totally integrated? I give you multiple other examples of where this technology is going. I don't know if any of you have ever used virtual devices, okay, and they do them for the games and so on. They're changing. That's the new virtual glasses. They look just like regular glasses. And you can't tell the difference. If any of you have ever driven a car that has heads up on it now, on the dashboard, I mean on the windshield, and it gives you your speed and it shows you the speed limit. And if you've got your GPS on, it tells you when you got to turn and so on. It's on your windshield. That same technology is being integrated into these glasses. And so all the big gaming companies, Fortnite and others, they are moving with this technology. We are within a year of being able to buy glasses just like this. And through thought, the kid's going to be able to play a video game. They could be sitting in your classroom playing a video game and you don't even know it. I could go on and on and on with examples. My point is simply this. The iPhone changed your life. Child's play in terms of where technology is about to take us. And can we simply just keep picking up barriers so kids can't use the technology? Or should we be preparing them to use the technology in a way in which they'll have to use it in the world beyond school? Is the purpose of school, school? Or is the purpose of school preparing kids for the world beyond school? Let me move to the workplace. McKinsey just completed a study. They took 100 small companies, 100 medium-sized companies, 100 large companies across the country. They went into those companies and they tried to analyze what would be the shift in the work requirements of their workforce from now to 2030. And what they found, not surprising, is that there would be a decline in the workplace of basic cognitive skills and of physical and manual skills. Now, in physical and manual skills, you probably can guess pretty quickly why that is. It's because the advancing technology can do so many of those tasks. But basic cognitive skills, why is that lower? Because you can Google it. In the world beyond school, if you need something, don't you Google it? Won't the employers want you to? But I want to caution you, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be teaching basic cognitive skills. I'm just saying this is what they'll use. Why should we be teaching it? Because you can't do the stuff on the right-hand side of this chart if you don't have basic cognitive skills. Our problem is we made basic cognitive skills the purpose of the school rather than the starting line. What increases? Higher cognitive skills, because I can't, and I'll give you some of these in a little bit, because you can't Google them. But look at the second one, social and emotional skills. Prior to the interruption caused by COVID-19, I would suggest that every school district in America was seeing an increase in mental health issues with kids. We saw all over the place. Being played out then by us trying to address SEL. In the workplace, they say that that still actually is going to become more important in the future than in the past. Now, why is it more important in the future? Because you can't Google it. The technology can't do it. And so we got this interesting dynamic. The kids are coming to us with greater deficits in this area. At the exact same time, the world outside of school is going to require a higher level. I would suggest to you the biggest gap we have in our schools is not academic, it's SEL. And then technological skills increased by 55%, but I will caution you, they're saying that doesn't mean the ability to use the latest technology, the devices themselves. It's the academics that underpin those devices. And essentially that is data analytics. Data analytics seems to be a growing core requirement in almost every job out there. This is the Amazon warehouse. Those little carts you see are robots. They go onto the tractor trailer or the train as it pulls up to the warehouse, goes on, reads the barcodes on the devices, pulls them off, takes them off, puts them on the shelves. You order a product, it goes out, reads the barcodes again, grabs the device, packages it out the door. Why am I showing you that? Because devices like this are not being only used in Amazon warehouses, they are now being used in almost every major supermarket chain in America. They are also being used increasingly in Walmart. Why is that important? Because Walmart is the largest employer in 25 of our nation's 50 states, and they are projecting a 70 to 75% decline in employment over the next 3 years because of advancing technology. As is supermarkets, as is Amazon. I ask you a tough question. Where's the unskilled go to work? But it's not just entry-level jobs. I wonder how many of you are old enough that you can remember when you were sick and you went to a doctor, you actually saw a doctor. Who do you see today? Nurse practitioner, PA. And when you do go see your doctor, and if you've had an annual physical, I want you to think about what happened in your annual physical. Did your doctor spend more time looking at the computer and peppering you with questions than physically examining you? And they ask you about your family history, your own medical history, pharmaceuticals that you have taken, what work, what that doesn't work.
Bill, I just want to add that Elizabeth Scaduto in the chat said that this morning's news said that Walmart plans to replace, excuse me, all cashiers. And Brian Warwald said that when he was young, his doctor made house calls.
Yeah, that's great because Brian must be like me, old enough to remember the doctor making house calls. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you, Bernadette. Yeah, so now I want you to, also, how many of you, I wonder, have ever used GPS in your car, either on your car or your cell phone, okay? And so when you go to use it, think about this. You go to use it, you plug in where you want to go. It tells you how long it's going to take you to get there. And it gives you the route to take. But have you ever noticed that when you're driving, sometimes it reroutes you halfway through? How's it know to do that? Okay. And what GPS does is As soon as you sign on and indicate where you're going, it takes 10 to 20 other people who will be on some of those same roads you're going to be on. And the algorithm they have know how long it should take them to go from point A to point B on that road. And if it takes longer, because of construction, accident, whatever, the GPS system, the algorithm automatically looks to reroute you. That's how it works, okay? Now keep that in mind. It knows your destination, and it takes 10 to 20 other people and pings them to you. When your doctor is peppering you with questions when you have your in, they're putting you into a database. There are 4 major medical record companies in the country. Every one of those medical records companies have anywhere from 66 million to 220 million people in their database. Everybody on this call, Zoom meeting, is in one or more of those databases. And when your doctor peppers you with questions about your family history, your own history, your age, pharmaceuticals you use, illnesses you've had, that algorithm does just what GPS does. It finds the 10 to 20 other people out of the 66 million to 220 million who are most like you. And it pings you to them. And it watches what happens to them. What pharmaceuticals work with them, what illnesses they get, everything. And that algorithm constantly updates. So when you come back in the next year for your annual physical, your doctor can see, oh, these are the things that better watch out for Bernadette. Because the 10 to 20 other people most like her, this is what happened to them. This changed the role of doctor forever. From providing patient care to managing patient care. It also has led to a total differentiation of the employment opportunities in the medical field. Where I'm going to take you is we as an organization working with AASA, American Association of School Superintendents, we're identifying each year the 25 most rapidly improving schools in America. And I didn't say highest performing, I said most rapidly improving. We have research funds, we go in and we get under the covers to see what these schools are doing differently than everybody else in the country. And ladies and gentlemen, they're changing the role of teacher. From providing content and delivering instruction to facilitating student learning. In many ways, the medical field is a prototype of what we see in these other schools. And by the way, it's not just the medical field. The legal field is moving the same way. The world of finance and accounting moving the same way. The workplace is fundamentally and irreversibly changing. I could hit every industry and I won't bother you to do that. But if any of you at any time would like to have a more detailed discussion on this, again, I'm going to give you a URL at the end. I've written white papers about it. We got all kinds of information about virtually every industry out there. They are all fundamentally and irreversibly changing. And my very deep worry is our schools are so forward focused, just trying to do better at what we did last year and not future focused, not putting that stake in the ground and building back from 3 to 5 years out of what will our kids need to know, do, and be like. We're simply preparing them for school, but not for the world beyond school. And can we use this interruption as the tipping point to change the system? Overall, what happens in the workplace then? This is U.S. Department of Labor data, broken down by low wage jobs, medium wage jobs, upper wage jobs in the year 2000. But I want you to think about how many people lost a job because of an ATM or a kiosk since the year 2000. Or the Walmart ones that are just going to, Bernadette, you just said, cashier's done. Warehouse workers done. So What would you guess? Wouldn't there be fewer lower wage jobs? It's not what's happening. There are actually more lower wage jobs. By 2018, last year, the Labor Department has released their data on. Why is that? Because I think the point we're missing is it's actually creating more jobs at the top. And that group at the top, somebody else cleans their houses. They have more help with childcare. They have help with their laundry. Somebody else is mowing their lawns. They eat out 2 or 3 times a week. That group at the top is creating this huge service sector economy, but the service sector doesn't pay enough for an individual or family to be financially independent. And we began to see what is called the missing middle. Looks, US Department of Labor data just released, projected for 2030. Why is this a huge issue? For 2 reasons. The primary purpose of public education was to prepare people for the middle class. And number 2, the social injustice issues, the polarization of the country. We are absolutely becoming polarized. And, you know, Bernadette and Kate and others and Don who asked me to talk about technology. This is about technology, but it's not just the devices. It's the structural changes it's causing and what we have to do, boardroom to classroom, to begin to think through and adjust those. This is an unbelievable change in a very short period of time. But we got the same school calendar, same bell schedules, same disciplines as when my dad had to ride a horse to school. And what's it causing? It's causing a real change in our kids. I wonder how many of you, within the first week of becoming old enough to drive, got your driver's license, right? We all did. Remember, this technology is an extension of these kids' lives. It's changed other things. Look at this. Next thing, this is not, I mean, this is a good change, the one I'm going to give you next, but nonetheless, a major change in behavior. How many of you knew friends that before they were legally old enough to drink went out and drank with friends? Look at this. How many of you had at least one date before you graduated from high school? How many of you had at least one part-time job before you graduated from high school? Look at the data, folks. The kids are fundamentally different. The world they're going to enter is fundamentally different. But we're locked into a 20th century system. And our kids feeling the stress. And I'm not suggesting that school is causing this stress. In fact, I'm going to suggest to you the stress on kids is less about school and more about the home or lack thereof environment they're in. But look at this data, just released by AMA. 1 in 12 high school kids this past school year cut themselves. 16% of high school students last year in an AMA survey reported they had contemplated suicide. Same surveying group, same question, year 2000. That percentage was 1.3%. Something dramatically has happened, folks.
We have a comment here from Elizabeth Scaduto saying, entering kindergarten 2020 will graduate in the class of 2033. If we do not, bless you, if we do not plan education for their future, they will have many missed opportunities that our education system helped cause.
She's so right. Yep. By the way, these mental health issues cut across social economic lines. This is family income, under 30,000, between 30 and 75,000, over 75. And Bernadette, keep just waving interrupting on any chat questions, be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. And yeah, just a side note, Bill, everything you're saying, I am living. I have a just turned 20-year-old and a 16-year-old. So I hear it. I hear it loud and clear.
Yeah, it's so different than when I was sorry to say when we were kids, but you were a kid when I was an adult. So when you were a kid and when your mom and dad were kids, the world has fundamentally changed for these kids. Yet while all these changes went on, what were we focused on in school? The standards in the test. And again, I'm not opposed to them. I ran the regions. I'm not opposed to them. But they don't address the first 5 issues I've listed here. So now what do we know because of the interruption? What happened during this interruption from March on? First thing is we learned something. The digital classroom and the traditional classroom requires a different set of skills, both for teacher and for student. Every school district in America found this out, that some of our best teachers, clearly not all, but some of our really best teachers in a traditional classroom have struggled mightily in the digital classroom. Some of the teachers who are struggling in the traditional classroom have actually flourished in the digital classroom. I told you that Mary Ellen and I have run roundtables with over 200 superintendents in their cabinets. We ask them about this question when we have the roundtables. I can tell you that almost every district has told us they had some teachers that were contemplating termination, lack of renewal, contract, lack of tenure, that they have found out we're superstars in this. So what do we find? They're a different set of skills. We also find the same thing is true with the kids. Some of the kids who were great in the traditional classroom have struggled terribly in the digital classroom, and some of the kids that weren't so good have thrived. So overall, I ask all of you who have curriculum responsibilities, what has this taught us about teaching and learning? Does the 20th century model work for everyone? It works great for many of us. Now, don't be offended by my next statement. But the 20th century system probably works better for the group on this call today than it does for the general population. Now, how can I make that statement? I'm like you, okay? I'm no different than all of you. When we were kids, we as a group, probably most of us liked school. So we went to college to major in school, so that when we graduated from college, we could return to school to do to others what had been done to us. And now somebody's trying to say we should change? And yeah, I am. That's just what I'm saying. But I don't think we can change the whole system. I think we got to have more flexibility in the system. Every other sector of society has figured that out. One model does not fit all. What else did we learn? We learned that we just had summer loss on steroids for some kids. And you will really learn that in reentry here. Some states in America historically only have an 8-week summer vacation. Some states have as long as 11 weeks. And the data, and this is not new data, But data is clear that on average, those states that have an 11-week summer vacation experience about twice the summer loss as those states that have an 8-week summer vacation. So what does that tell you? The longer you're out of the system, the steeper the loss. Okay, the progression, it curves upward. So now what just happened? On average, and I'm going to take third grade math as my example here, and then I'll show you some others. What we know historically in New York State is that the summer loss in math for kids typically puts them back into about mid-April. And we've had multiple studies over the last 30 years in this state, and it's consistent with other states. That's typically what happened. But now what just happened with school closure happening in March, and remember, the longer you're out, the steeper that increase, is that some of those kids, either because of the digital divide, or because they just didn't bother to become engaged, or because they had teachers who weren't very adept at it. Some of those kids have had minimal instruction since April. Others have had great instruction. But for some of our kids, what we know in the 3 national studies out in the last 3 weeks, that summer loss is going to put them back into at least December. They've lost at least a half a year of growth. Now, if I have lost half of my math skills from 3rd grade, am I going to be able to do 4th grade math? So what are you going to do? Just push them on to 4th grade like none of this happened? And so let me tell you the most common scenario we're seeing. And it relates to this extended summer loss. And this is about reentry. We're finding that in a number of states, and it's the most common throughout the country except in the Northeast and California. The rest of the country is doing something different for reentry than the Northeast and California is. And that is they're going to loop their teachers from last year with the class. Why? But they're not going to loop them for the whole year. They're going to loop them for a few weeks or the first marking period. Keep the class and the teacher together as much as they can. And then switch to the new teacher at the end of the first marking period. They're doing that because they say, number one, relationships is the key here. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. Relationships are the key. And these teachers know those kids, and those kids know these teachers. These teachers know the parents, and the parents know the teachers. And so what typically happens is at the end of the school year, you go to a new class. The kids don't know the teachers don't know the kids, the whole dynamic. In elementary school, it takes a few weeks for everybody to get to know each other. You just eliminated that problem. Bigger issue is those teachers know which kids were engaged during the interruption and which kids were not. Those teachers already know the learning styles, interests, aptitudes of these kids. They're saying looping is a key. We're not doing it in the Northeast, and we're not doing it in California. We are in the rest of the country. By the way, what is magical about the fact that we should switch teachers when we switch school years? Anything magical about that? Or would it have always made sense to switch teachers at the end of the first marking period and do a more gradual transition during that first marking period? This is 3rd grade math. Here's 4th grade math. These are the combination of the 3 national studies. Remember, I'm going to give you a URL to get both my PowerPoint if you want it, as well as some of the white papers and notes. Here's 5th grade math. Reading isn't as big of a loss as math, but it's still a real problem. What else do we know? We know the mental health issues increased while the kids were out. Essential question. Is SEL, the whole issues of relationship, SEL, mental health, is it a core or support responsibility of schools? If you look at this, what the medical field calls a behavioral health continuum, on the left-hand side, you got developmental skills. Things like stop, think, focus, have empathy, basic skills. And then we also have prevention skills, a little bit higher order, like conflict resolution skills for individual students. And if somebody doesn't have the developmental skills and prevention skills, you then move them into intervention and treatment. Most schools are spending their time and resources in the proportion of where that yellow line is. The nation's most rapidly improving schools are not. They're sending them over here. They've made SEL a core responsibility of every classroom teacher, every support staff, everybody that touches the kids. And they had deep professional development to help them understand how to do that. Fourth thing we learned is classroom management is more complicated in a virtual environment than it is when you see the kids face to face. No big surprise. Fifth thing we learned is advancing technologies are not going to slow up. Bernadette, I'm going to try something. I don't think it's going to work, okay? I'm going to tell you up front. So
Okay.
I need to have you tell me if it's working or not by thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay.
I'm going to try to roll the dice on a piece of technology here, okay? To everybody on the call, I don't think it's going to work. So when I give you the URL and we send you the PowerPoint, we'll send you this one, okay? And it's an example of where the technology is headed, educational technology. It's an example from China. I'm not advocating for it. I just want to show the capacity. So Bernadette, thumbs up or thumbs down, okay?
Okay. It's thumbs up. It's very low though, we can't hear it. You know, we saw it and we could read the subtitles, but we couldn't hear anything, just so you know.
Yeah, so I'm going to use, and I'm good. I'm glad we got at least that much, Bernadette. What it is a device that they're using is a headset they put on the kid, and it monitors their level of attention and whether they're focused or not for every child, and sends a report to the teacher's control panel so the teacher can see what kid is really engaged and what kid is not. Furthermore, sends that report on to their parents, the kid's parents. Furthermore, aggregates it for the classroom to the principal's office to show what classrooms teachers have the kids most engaged and what ones are not engaged. Okay. I'm not advocating we do it. I just want to show you the capacity of the technology, because what I also show you when I send out my PowerPoint to all of you are then some examples of some things now happening at MIT and 4 other research institutions around the country, where if you go back and remember what I showed earlier, where the technology and where Siri and Alexa are going, together with a new Google app that will take on your phone. If you keep your calendar on your phone, there's a new Google app you can get right now. Keep your calendar on your phone. It monitors what you should be doing. Not only alerts you, but for example, in one video we have shows a person's phone, there is a lady by the name of Lisa. The phone knows that Lisa is scheduled for a hair appointment, calls the salon without Lisa telling it to, has her calendar, knows what she typically gets done each time she goes to the salon, and has a total conversation with the receptionist in the salon to make the appointment. Total conversation based. What's happening is all this technology is coming together, and where the large publishers are going is a fundamental shift in the materials they're about to develop. Almost robotic-like for young kids, furry little animals to talk to, that also measures facial expressions so they can determine how engaged the kids are, has a conversation with the kid, then based upon where the kid is, gives them projects and activities to do around the scale. If any of you have been at home trying to do your job and you have school-age kids and you're trying to teach them at the same time, would you like that technology there in your house to help you? To engage the kid, be totally interactive with the kid? Would we like it in our classrooms? My point, and at some point, if Bernadette, we get beyond social total isolation, I'd love to come down and meet face-to-face with this group.
Right.
Show them where artificial intelligence is about to take us.
Yeah.
Artificial intelligence is about to exponentially change how we educate kids.
Yeah.
I was on the phone yesterday with Superintendent in Miami-Dade, Florida, 4th largest district in the country. They just did a survey of parents that they got back on Friday. 34% of parents said they will not send their kids back to school next year.
So what was their plan? Was their plan to homeschool them?
They went to schools to provide virtual instruction. But what do we know? It doesn't work for everybody, does it?
Right.
And remember everything I've already said. We've got to figure out how to teach in multiple modalities and environments. And artificial intelligence is going to enable us to do that. The question is, are we future focused enough to even begin to think about it? Are we just trying to maintain the schools of our youth? Earlier, I put up digital delivery, and I said, we're all over the lot here. On AI, we're really behind the 8 ball. We're hardly paying any attention. And we've been so consumed about the interruption, and now, and rightly so, concerned about social justice issues, that maybe we're not paying attention to some of the real technology issues we should be paying attention to. So what can we anticipate for next school year? Number one, I hope to God I'm wrong, but I'm afraid I'm not. There's likely to be another interruption. And here's my take. When the interruption occurred in March, no one really expected us to be prepared for it. And so in some ways, we got a pass. I don't think we're going to get a pass the second time, because it went on so long, people are just going to panic. No, not again. And they're going to want us to be able to do things differently than we did the last time. Number two, and I said it earlier, I think the mental health issues are going to have exploded while these kids were out. In a lot of ways, I think what occurred is the mental health issues we were experiencing pre-COVID-19 The epicenter of those were in the home or lack thereof, like I said earlier. We just sent them back into that epicenter of that. When they come back in the fall, we're going to have all kinds of issues in and around this. And the key to the foundational skill, if you will, to dealing with them is relationships. And we got to think about, how do we make that a core responsibility here? What I worry about is we can't put anything more on your classroom teachers' plates. Buckling at the knees. They were pre-COVID-19. So where I'm going to take in my recommendations in a couple of minutes is first priority for this group, figure out what you take off the plate. You have too many standards. The plate has got to be based upon really good data, and that data's got to be anchored in two things. If a standard is a prerequisite for future learning, and that's why I showed you math earlier. Third grade math is a prerequisite. Most of those standards in math are a prerequisite for fourth grade math. They become therefore a priority or an anchor standard. There are some other standards that in a scaffold curriculum are very important. And some of those may relate to social justice issues we're talking about here. So what are the prerequisite standards? Again, 3 national studies. Chief 3000 just did one with a group. TEA just did one, Texas Educational Agency, which is their state ed department, and NWEA just did one. And all 3 came up with almost the same list. And they show that less than half of all of our standards are actually anchored or prerequisite standards. And so I'm not suggesting you throw away the other standards by any means, but I am suggesting we got to give our teachers a clear blueprint. These are essential, non-negotiable, and these are negotiable. Because you just lost for a lot of kids a half a year of school. How are you going to make it up? How are you going to add SEL? How are you going to refocus on relationships if you don't take something off the plate? What does that professional development then look like for the teachers? You got to support them. Forgive me. Remember, I ran curriculum and testing. It's not about the content. They know the content, folks. They got undergraduate and graduate degrees. But where have we spent most of our PD time over the last couple decades? It's on these 2 areas, which they were already, I'm not saying we couldn't improve and sharpen, but they're basically, we're pretty good in that area. Where weren't they so good on? Didn't have training in? Social emotional learning and all the technologies, knowledges and skills. Next area. What's your PD program for parents? What did he say? Where's a PD program for parents? Why would we have a PD program for parents? Well, let me ask you, as school leaders, would you ever have sent a teacher into a classroom with absolutely no training? Or even a teaching assistant? Who has become the teacher? Or at minimum, the teacher assistant? The parent and the caregiver. What's your PD for parents?
Bill, just a quick question. I apologize. I'm going back a couple of thoughts that you had when you had mentioned the work on the prerequisite standards from Achieve and NWEA. We have a comment here from Fernando saying he'd love to get access to that work on those anchor standards.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to give you eight things at the end. Remember, they can check what they want. Actually, that is one of the 8.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Technological advancement will continue to accelerate. I gave you the China example, but it's going to be around AI. And the workplace is going to continue to dramatically change. I wonder how many of you have spouses, significant others who are working at home, and the employers have now said you can work from home permanently or an extended period of time or 3 days a week, whatever. The workplace is fundamentally changing because of this. So, what's it mean? It means it's time to reimagine the system. To be future focused, not forward focused. This is my URL. I'm going to and I'll put it back up here again, but I'm going to leave it up for a moment if you want to take it down. Because when you go to that URL, you're going to find that there are 8 different areas I will hit now that you can check what you want additional information on or help. Depending on what you want, we'll send you some stuff, or if it's, depending if it's, one of the senior administrator in the district and he wants to, she or he wants to talk with some of their key staff, we would even arrange a conference call if we, with myself or one of my colleagues.
I typed that URL into the chat, Bill, as well, so everybody, you can just copy and paste that.
Right.
And if you don't mind, I would put something in there too, so that if we could post that information to our region, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll post the 8 things. And Joe Shannon is on the call with me. Joe is one of our senior staff members. And Joe will take the first lead of following up on these with staff. And so that you'll have a contact person. I will contact some of you if possible, but between Joe and I will get to you, okay? So my 8 recommendations. The first one is just a cultural one, which is, and I've said it over and over, you need to be more future focused than forward focused. Putting that stake in the ground. What will kids need to know, do, and be like? Where will the technology be that we could use in education? What could our schools look like in 3 to 5 years? And don't think with a flip of a switch, and I know you know this, but you can't change schools on a flip of a switch. The change has to be evolutionary. Don't try to be a revolutionist. Revolutionists get killed. Make it evolutionary. This is the picture of my dad on his 101st birthday with his great-great-grandson. One of 13 great-great-grandchildren he had, okay? And he was, when he was, this picture was taken, and this was in January. We just lost him 2 weeks ago. But Dad was telling this little guy, and it looks like he's understanding what Pop, we all call him Pop, my dad Pop. Looks like they understand what Pop was saying. No way he really understood. But my granddaughter said to me, who is Santana's mom, that Santana wouldn't understand what Pop was saying. And I said, he's not talking to Santana, he's talking to all of us. And what Dad was telling him that day, and this goes back to my culture piece, is Dad was telling them that when he was little, that he remembered a couple kids who had disabilities. And he felt he was always sensitive to them, and he used to feel bad that some other kids picked on him. But Dad then told all of us that being sensitive wasn't enough. Even being an advocate wasn't enough. And Dad told all of us that day that it wasn't until he had 2 grandchildren, who happened to be 2 of my 5 kids, who were disabled, that he really understood. I have a daughter with something called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Puts her on the deep end of autism and the deep end of epilepsy. She's 47. Her mental age is somewhere between 2 and 3, probably. Dad was really close to her. Spent a lot of time with her. I have a son who at the age of 11 was in a critical accident. He was hit by a drunken driver when he was on a bike. He spent several months in a coma and on life support systems. Suffered a traumatic brain injury. But He's now obviously an adult. Despite all those disabilities, he's a 4-year college graduate. He didn't have a good job. He actually got a great job. He's director of information technologies for a large medical group. He's married with 3 kids. Dad is very close to Paul as well. See, what my dad did was he walked the walk. He just didn't talk about helping people. Santana is obviously of mixed race. But I have 2 other grandchildren, not directly in line with Santana, who are African American. They're obviously adopted. My daughter-in-law is Mexican, so we have 2 Mexican American grandchildren as well. Dad was close to all of them. Because that day, Dad was telling everybody in the room, he said, you know what? Remember, he grew up in rural New York State. He said, I never saw a Black person until I was an adult. But he walked the walk. At his funeral, those 2 Black grandchildren and Mexican American grandchildren were the bearers. Nobody wept more at my dad's funeral than they did. And they did because they knew he really, really cared for them. They cared for him because he cared for them. I want to challenge everyone on the call today. It's not okay just to talk about the issue. My dad walked the walk. When we talk about culture trump strategy, are we walking the walk or are we just talking about it? Sorry for that sidetrack, but I think it's important given where we are as a nation right now.
We all want to express our deepest condolences to you and your family. What an amazing father you had. It sounds amazing.
He was amazing. And by the way, Bernadette, he only went to school as far as 8th grade.
Wow.
Yeah. He died in the house that he lived in for 101 years. I grew up on a dairy farm in northern New York State. Dad left to help support the family at the end of 8th grade.
I remember you saying also up until just a year or 2 ago, he was ladders.
Yeah, he really worked hard until he was 97. But then he was on top of the barn trying to fix the roof, and he fell off the barn at 97. So wow. Anyways, let me continue. You got to prioritize the standards, and I know, Bernadette, somebody just asked about that. That's the second item to check here. But I am going to suggest to you that if you don't create a culture that is more future-focused, I'm not sure you're going to be able to get to the prioritized standards, because everybody is an advocate for one of those standards, and you get in this internecine warfare. So prioritize the standards. Once you've prioritized the standards, and this is really equally as important, you've got to teach those standards to a deeper level of meaning than we typically do. How many of you would really like to take a test, an 11th or 12th grade subject that you never taught? But you all took those tests once and passed them. And why did we pass them back then, but we can't today? Because if you don't use them, you lose them. We know that. You've got to teach them to a level of deep understanding. This is something called the application model, 5 levels of learning. And in the world our kids are going to live in, we got to get them up to level 5. Our tests measure level 1 and 2. So I'm not opposed to the test because I can't get to 5 if I don't have 1 and 2. But 1 and 2, while it's essential, is not adequate. And the problem is it takes longer to get them to level 5. And that's why we got to figure out what to wean out of the curriculum, not what to add to it. You probably all remember Bloom's taxonomy. There's the original Bloom's and there's the revised Bloom's. We use the revised Bloom's because it gets you up to creativity, which the technology is not good at. And if you put simply rigor and relevance up the left, rigor or Bloom's up the left-hand side, the application model across the bottom, and you break it into 4 quadrants. Quad A is low-level knowledge with no application. It's what the state tests measure. And by the way, it is essential. I can't get to B, C, and D without A. I'm not opposed to A. B, or C is higher level skills. It's college prep. B is the real world application of A. That's career and tech ed. But many of those career and tech ed jobs and skills are going to be automated right out of the workplace. You want to get the D? That's where kids have got to be. And what are those skills? They are skills, and this is from Jobs of the Future by the World Economic Forum, recent report, 10 most sought after skills by the year 2030 in all jobs. And they are all the skills that the technology can't do. Complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordination with others, emotional intelligence, active listening, service orientation, negotiation skills, and cognitive flexibility. Again, if you want them, we'll send you the PowerPoint so you can have them. And in many ways, what you can do is determine what quad your instruction is in by watching what the students do. And it's the verb you use to describe what the student is doing. So in quad A, they're doing things like recall, or count, or list. B, it's things like follow, apply. C, it's things like analyze, debate, justify. D, it's develop, it's formulate, it's invent. We have a process called instructional practice review, which would guide you to figure out classroom by classroom, and individual teachers can use it, as to what quad instruction in any classroom is. And if it's in quad A or quad C, that will give you specific recommendations on how to move it to quad D. And it does that by projects, by the questioning techniques that the teacher uses, in a series of strategies. Now, why is all this important? If I've been successful at all in my presentation today, the next part will make sense. If I miscommunicated, you won't have a clue. In the pre-internet age, when all of us went to school, we had to teach A and C because you couldn't Google it. When we were kids, you either had to have knowledge or you had to know where to go get knowledge. And it wasn't just in school. How many of your families had encyclopedias? But in the internet age, in the world beyond school, you have to function in B and D, and increasingly it's just D, because you can't Google it. And even the advancing AI technology can't do D. D is what the kids are going to have to be able to do. Here's our ultimate problem. While we got to get the D, we are regulated, certified, tenured, contracted. We test the kids, and we evaluate the teachers based upon A and C. And you're not going to change that unless you change culture. That's why the first one on, are you future focused? You're going to do all these things. Also recognize the piece on relationships with SEL is so important. But the key then is you need a comprehensive professional development plan. We would love to sit down with any of the districts, Bernadette working with you through BOCES, to help them really conceptualize what does a PD program around all these areas really look like? Because it can't be sit and get. It's got to be more of a coaching model, we're realizing.
And I just want to add that, yes, everyone here, we at Eastern Suffolk BOCES do work with Bill Daggett and his team. So if you ever needed more information, you can contact Bill directly, as he had suggested, with his URL that he gave us, and you can also contact me.
Right, yeah, thank you, Bernadette. And I won't get into it all right now, but there are teaching and learning issues we've got to address. There are instructional leadership issues that we got to address. And because of reentry, there's a lot of organizational issues. There is a paper I have on this. The 7th of the 8 items in the URL, if you check it, we'll send you the paper that lays out all 12 of these, okay? And what you can do and what you might want to think about, and how they relate to technology and how they relate to professional development, okay? And finally, we also recognize right now, you got to deal with a lot of these operational issues, which are on blue. And so there's a section, an item you can check on that as well. So Bernadette, that's my storyline. I came within 90 seconds of the time here.
You're wonderful. But and I just hear Erin from Erin just said, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions that they want to add, Adrian just said, wow, in all caps, thank you. And a few thank yous are coming into the chat. Excellent content and delivery. So inspiring, feeling motivated. Yes, thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'm just sharing with you. Thank you so much. I'm ready. Please, can we get the recording? Everybody, we are posting the recording on our website under the Regional Think Tank page, which is under Professional Development. Handouts we sent, somebody just asked, in an email ahead of time. There were 2 handouts that Bill had given us in advance, and we will get this PowerPoint and we will post that as well. Somebody just asked that too. How do we reinvent the New York ed system? Glenn just asked the group.
You can answer that in 30 seconds, right, Bill?
That's right. Listen, I have a call on Thursday, an hour-and-a-half call with the Chancellor of New York City and all his regional superintendents on that very issue. So, you know, first I'll solve New York City issue and then the rest of the country, okay? Listen, Bernadette, thanks. And I hope all the participants in your BOCES understand what an extraordinary job you all do provide on professional development. Mary Ellen and I obviously know the whole state pretty well and the country. You're in a class by yourself down there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And we, so appreciate the time that you have, offered to us, really gratis. And we really appreciate that very much. We know how busy you are, and just all of your research and everything that you brought to us today is just so inspiring. And we really appreciate the information. I just wanted to, again, great presentation, always inspirational, so much to consider. Looking forward to learning more.
Fantastic.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you again, Bill. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to keep this on for a little bit more because some people are still saying thank you. Love the power of your visuals and story. Beautiful presentation, inspirational. Great session. Thank you so much for helping to redirect our focus on the future. So much to think about and relevant in our current time. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And hopefully you all signed in also on the form. Our pleasure.
Bernadette, I'll touch base with you a little later. Have to hop on to another meet. All right?
Okay, no problem. I'll end it for everybody now. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Thank you.